Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Mizo Passion, YouTube's premium channel about all things women's football. And today, there is no Women's World Cup games on feature as the group stages have just wrapped up as of yesterday. And today, I just thought since there's no World Cup football going on, I'll just look back on the group stages here and pick out some of the winners, some of the losers, and the MVP, as well as the best 11 from the group stages. And as well, since now we know which teams are going to be in the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup, and give my predictions as to which teams I think will make it to the quarterfinals of the Women's World Cup. So without further ado, let's get started with the winners. Undoubtedly, the team to beat here at the Women's World Cup so far is Japan, who are currently unbeaten with 3 wins on the board and over 10 goals scored and 0 conceded. Japan are undoubtedly the overall winners of the group stages of the Women's World Cup because they have shown that they have so much attacking nous and defending proficiency here that they're definitely going to be the team to watch throughout the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. And which team, should they even be able to knock out Japan of the Women's World Cup, they will definitely be riding such a huge wave of momentum considering where Japan have come from. But Japan are the biggest winners because, again, looking at their statistics and their records, they are such a well-oiled machine that if you remove one player from the Japanese side, the team will not lose its strength because they are just a well-rounded team, and I think they are the biggest winners of the group stages of the Women's World Cup so far. Up next are the losing finalists of the 2019 Women's World Cup final in the Netherlands, who have been a very good team to watch in the group stages of the Women's World Cup. They had a very slow start against Portugal, but they really picked it up against the USA and finished off with aplomb against the Vietnam women's national team here. And I think going into the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup, the Netherlands are just like Japan in terms of them being a well-oiled machine, but I think they are edged out just a little bit by Japan in terms of the strength and depth of their numbers here. Of course, the Netherlands are missing their talisman in Viviane Miedema, who suffered an ACL injury late last year in December, but apart from that, I think they have a very good squad around them, and should injuries not be an issue for the Dutch team here, I think just like Japan, they can also have a very good run in the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. Definitely one of the teams to watch in the knockouts here. Now the next team of winners we have is Colombia, and I think that so far they have been the most entertaining team to watch at the Women's World Cup because they played with such heart, such passion, and such fire in them that it's no surprise when you see that they finished top of their group, especially when it comes to being ahead of Germany, who again were knocked out of the Women's World Cup here. But looking at their 3 matches so far, I think the most downward game in terms of the attacking style and the overall flair of the Colombia side was against Morocco, who just managed to keep them out of arm's reach the entire game. But that is not to take away from their performance in that match and the previous 2 matches against Korea and especially Germany, where Colombia really turned up and gave the Germans a fight for their lives. And of course, as we know, the Germans did end up losing that match. And I think Colombia have had a lot of flair going into the group stages of the Women's World Cup, and I think looking at the knockouts here, they will definitely have a good run and continue to threaten the status quo they've done so far in the group stages of the Women's World Cup. And to round out our group of winners, we have Nigeria, who in my opinion have one of the most resilient, one of the most toughest, most will-oriented and charming and charismatic teams when it comes to the Women's World Cup so far, because looking at the group that they were in, it was very hard to pick who was going to go in, but most of the favorites were going to be Australia and Canada. But for Nigeria to come through and to cause an upset and actually finish top of the group shows the presence of a huge fighting spirit that the Nigerians will definitely use to their advantage going to the knockouts of the Women's World Cup here. And again, they have one of the most well-rounded teams when it comes to defense, midfield, and attack. And I think just like Japan, they are one of those teams where if you remove one player and put in another, the performances won't really dip down that much. But it is definitely going to be very intriguing to see how far the Super Falcons can go in this tournament because they're going to be facing some tougher opposition here, because one thing that's been lacking from Nigeria's game so far is goals. Yes, they managed to put on a show against Canada, but looking at the people who they're going to be facing up against here in the knockout stages, they're definitely going to have to add more goals to their game and focus a little bit less on being defensively solid, because really when it comes to the Women's World Cup or just any knockout tournament in general, it's not about who has the best form going into the games, but who shows up. So hopefully Nigeria can show up when it comes to scoring goals. And now for the losers of the group stage, and we're going to start with South Africa here. And yes, whilst I note that South Africa did qualify for the knockout stage of the Women's World Cup, I think that they did make things a little bit too difficult for themselves in the process of qualifying for the knockout stages, because in all of their matches except the one against Italy here, South Africa scored first. In the first game against Sweden, they scored first and they scored an own goal until Sweden then finally came back to beat South Africa 2-1. In their second game, they were actually 2 goals up for the majority of the game, and they just capitulated and failed to manage the game as they drew 2-2 with Argentina here. And obviously they did come back to win against Italy and qualify, but I think South Africa are one of the losers here because they really let themselves down here. It's not that the opposition suddenly became better than them, but South Africa were, in my opinion, the strongest team here at the World Cup in terms of the group stage that they were in, with Sweden, Argentina, and Italy here. But unfortunately, because of their mismanagement when it came to the games that they were playing in, I think they were the biggest losers here, because now the teams that they will be facing in the knockouts here, should South Africa advance from the round of 16 here, which I doubt they will because they got the Netherlands, they will know that South Africa has a huge defensive frailty which they'll take advantage of. Up next we have Canada, who for more than just one reason were one of the biggest losers of the Women's World Cup here, because when it comes to on-pitch performances, they kind of looked out of their depth except against Ireland, but that's really being nice here because Ireland really did give them a fight for their lives here. And when it comes to the other teams that they were facing up in Nigeria and Australia, Canada just looked like the second best team on the pitch here, and it shows because unfortunately they were eliminated from the Women's World Cup, so had to be one of the favorites to just make it out of the group stages in general here. And to the off-the-pitch issues that have been recorded on this channel and by different media outlets all over the world, Canada are the biggest losers again, because now, if anything, they've given unfair justification, of course, for the federation to say, oh, we can't really give you resources and financial support given your performance at the Women's World Cup, which is a very, very stupid reason in my opinion. But at the same time, these federations don't care. Give them an inch, they'll take the whole yard. So that's just another reason as to why Canada are the biggest losers. But on that note, hopefully a consensus can be reached between the players and the federation on the future of women's football in Canada. This next one is a little bit of a cheat here, as I have put both Ireland and Haiti on the list of losers here, and I call them losers not in the sense because they were knocked out early or because they were debuting nations, but I call them losers because they were unfortunate not to get more out of the group stages of the Women's World Cup. Because if you watch those teams play, you would know that they deserve to leave the World Cup at least with something here. Of course, Ireland did leave with a point, Haiti left with nothing, but given their individual performances across the group stages here of the World Cup, I do believe that they should have qualified, both teams, especially Ireland here, because Ireland were definitely the more fierce side, but unfortunately, I think it was just a matter of inexperience costing them, especially looking at the opposition that they faced off. And for Haiti, they really did put in some spirited performances, especially against England and China, for example. But again, they were unfortunate to even get a goal to show for their efforts here. And I call them losers because they just really deserved way more than they got at the Women's World Cup. But like I said earlier, it's really about who shows up on the day. It's not about who's the better team going in. So really unfortunate in this case for those two teams. And no points for guessing who is our final loser here, as it is Germany. Germany, of course, were expected to be one of the favorites going into the World Cup, and people were really touting them for even making the finals. But as we can see here, Germany have been eliminated from the Women's World Cup. And it's a very disappointing sign of the times that German football is kind of in a recession or a lull here, as both the men's team and the women's team both got knocked out of their respective World Cups at the group stages here by, oddly enough, the same team. So I guess South Korea has some unknown vendetta against the Germans here. But going back to the team here, I think there needs to be a reshuffling and a rethink of ideas by the German Football Federation to really see where they're going as a nation and what needs to be improved or adjusted to get them back to the top of the table here, because it's not too long ago that Germany was one of the most feared teams. But other than that, there is a very promising sign with the current young group that's there, with the likes of Brandt and Oberdorf, to lead the way for the national team in years to come. And for the MVP of the group stages, I had a lot of difficulties in choosing this one, but I think there won't be too many people who will go against this decision here. But my MVP is definitely going to be Chamaka Nadozi, the goalkeeper for the Nigeria Super Falcons here. I think out of all the players who played throughout the group stages of the Women's World Cup, she had the most influential performances throughout her games here, as she She kept Nigeria in the game against Canada through some very good saves, same as against Australia, even though she conceded 2 goals. And of course, she managed to keep a clean sheet against the Ireland national team here. So I think Nadozie, she definitely gets the MVP award in my opinion here. But if you think that Nadozie is not the worthy winner of the MVP of the group stages here, please put in the comments who you think is your MVP and we can discuss it there. Up next, we have, of course, the best 11 of the group stages that you can see on your screens now. I won't go into too much detail as to why I chose those respective players to be in my best 11 and the substitutes as well, but I do believe that these are the players who really stood out the most to me. And of course, you're welcome to agree, to disagree, to tell me who should have been there, who should not be there, and you can even make your own exercise and we just discuss it in the comments below. And finally, as you can see on your screen, we have the brackets for the round of 16 of the Women's World Cup. And I'm just going to make my predictions real quick. I won't really go into too much detail again as to why, but I just really think that the teams I selected here are the ones who have the most probability of advancing to the quarterfinals of the World Cup, just based on current form as well as their performances in the group stages. But again, keep in mind, it's not about who's the better team, it's about who shows up on the day. So the first game was Switzerland versus Spain. I've said Spain. In the previous video, I did highlight how much I don't like the way Switzerland play for obvious reasons. The next game is the Netherlands versus South Africa. I picked the Netherlands there. Next game, we have Norway versus Japan, which will be a very entertaining match in my opinion, but I've gone for Japan here. Sweden and the USA, I do think that the USA will just edge out Sweden here. Then next up, we have Australia taking on Denmark, and I do think Australia will be the winners here, especially with Sam Kerr playing. Next, we have the colonizer and the colonized in France versus Morocco, and I think Morocco will definitely give a good fight, and I'm going to be very, very audacious here and pick Morocco to win here. Next, we have England versus Nigeria, and I'm giving Nigeria the nod here, even though England do have the capacity to win. And finally, we have Colombia and Jamaica, and I think Colombia will be the team to beat here. So those are my predictions there. Please make sure you add in the comments what your predictions are. But other than that, thank you very much for watching. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.